What we're going to do is we are going to cover several big issues, all moderated by our able moderator John Maroon here. But let's start at the far end.
Right. Thank you, Ashley.
Oh, first time you've ever been called able? Is that what it is? Yes, oh. So, well, first, let's start off at the far end here. Let's talk about Dave Dreiling, the CEO of GTM Haynes, Champion Brands. You've seen the big exhibit in the back there. We want to thank you to Champion for being our title sponsor today. That's Dave Dreiling. Comes in from Manhattan, Kansas, by the way. Manhattan, Kansas, the home of the Kansas Jayhawks, or Kansas State, not the Kansas State, Kansas State, which plays my alma mater, UCLA, in the Cactus Bowl on December 26th. I wish you luck. So there, I don't mean that, Dave, but thanks for coming. So that's Dave Dreiling. Next to Dave Dreiling is Terry Hasseltine. Terry Hasseltine runs Maryland Sports Authority, Maryland Sports and Stadium Authority, regulate and control and help build the business for Maryland sports and for all the mini stadiums here in the state of Maryland. Gabby Rowe with YSC Sports Marketing knows everything that there is to know about sports sponsorship. And I want him to tell us more about that. We got Max. Max, you guys got to hear Max Levitt's story. So Max is a CNN Hero nominee this year. Max is leveling the playing field, donates $1 million worth of gently used sporting goods equipment to needy leagues, teams, clubs, and tournaments in the Washington, D.C. area, and is fast growing. So Max Levitt, our CNN Hero nominee. Next to him is John Solomon, who wrote all the Project Play report for the Aspen Institute. You got a copy of it. Picked up there in the front. So the Aspen Institute's Project Play, the editorial director, John Solomon here, who knows all the statistics about participation. And you know our good friend LeVar Arrington, NFL great, the Washington Redskins 6 years, New York Giants 1 year, Penn State University, known for the LeVar Leap and many other things. And LeVar's been a real trooper today. We've had him on a couple of panels, and he's done double duty, so thank you very much. Now I wanted to introduce John Maroon. So John Maroon started out with the Cleveland Indians, Major League Baseball, then the Cleveland Indians, then the Baltimore Orioles, then the Washington Redskins. And now,
I couldn't keep a job.
And now Maroon PR. And so John is were you at the Redskins when LeVar was there?
My second to last day at the Redskins was draft day. And I got to fly with LeVar back from New York, and we had a good old time, and then I moved on with my life, and he played football.
Not too often you get to hang with the first-round draft pick. Yeah. So, John, the table is yours.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for the long-winded introductions. Now it'll end at 5:15. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the laugh. All right, look, we're going to go through this. I'm going to ask these guys a series of questions, kind of keep it lively. Hopefully at the end you guys will have a few questions for them as well. But we're going to start out with a lightning round. This is just simply a one-word answer. We'll start with you, Dave, and work our way down. Yes or no? Trophies for everyone or trophies only for winners? Go.
You said yes or no? Yeah.
Oh, you know what I mean. Don't be a smart ass. Nobody likes a smart ass, Dave, all right? Am I wrong?
Trophies for winners.
Trophies for nobody.
Winners.
Winners.
Everyone up to a certain age.
Come on, LeVar. You know you got
What? Everyone up to a certain age.
Oh, interesting.
No. Winners.
I thought you'd agree with the James Harrison agreement there, yep. No, that was good, and the certain age is interesting, and no one, Terry, that is interesting. I'd ask you to expound, but we're on the clock.
Play for the love of the game.
So he's going to expound anyway. All right. Let's start with John Solomon. Now, all you guys got a copy of the new report that the Aspen Institute put out on youth sports, on participation. It's on the League Network magazine, so you saw some of the findings. John, speak a little bit to the report and some of the more interesting findings, some of the things that maybe were the big findings in your view.
Yeah, a couple things stand out. One, youth sports team participation continues to go down. We've seen this for a number of years. In 2016, this is the most recent available data, 37% of kids ages 6 to 12 played team sports on a regular basis, and that's down from 45% in 2008. So we continue to see the trend go down and down. Number of different reasons, as we've talked about throughout today. And it's a public health crisis because kids aren't being active, they're not playing. 25% of kids ages 6 to 12 are active to a healthy level. That's down 2 percentage points from the previous year, and that's the steepest one-year decline on record, dating back to 2008. Another big finding is youth coaches continue to not be trained very well. That's a huge issue. Less than 1/3 of youth sports coaches are trained in key competencies, and by key competencies, we're talking about concussion management, CPR, basic first aid, sports skills and tactics, physical conditioning, motivational techniques with kids. And then finally, the household income, the amount of money that kids have and the parents have, that continues to be a huge factor in terms of who plays sports and who doesn't. In 2016, you had 68% of kids in household incomes of $100,000 or more played sports. On the flip side, it was only 34% for kids who are in households of $25,000 or less. So we're really leaving behind a lot of kids who should be playing, and it's a public health crisis.
Those are shocking. I mean, the one that jumped out at me with the coaches and the lack of training, because it seems like there's resources out there for coaches. Is part of it, in your view, and any of you guys have an opinion on this, please chime in, but is part of it that, hey, look, I'm a youth coach, I'm volunteering for my kids' team, I only have so much time to dedicate to this. What are kind of the factors in that one?
Yeah, that is a big factor. Now, I'm a coach myself, and you only have so much time in the day, so we have to figure out a way to get standards across the board for coaches. That you have to be able to train them within a reasonable amount of time. We're all volunteers. But it just has to happen. We hear a lot of times talk about youth sports has become more professionalized. Really, it's just more commercialized, because if it was more professionalized, we would have set standards across the board for coaches, and there would be professional type standards and skill sets for coaches.
It's great, John. Thanks for the insights. I know we're going to touch on more of those during the conversation, but thank you. LeVar. LeVar, Aaron.
Follow that, huh?
Yeah, and then follow that. I want to ask you a question. So, when you were a kid, obviously you were a freak athlete, and you were a multi-sport athlete. You played a bunch of different sports as a kid growing up. Didn't really specialize until you said, okay, football's my thing. That's changing these days, right? More and more kids are specializing at such a young age. What are your thoughts on that? Is that healthy because they get to focus on that? Is it really limiting them in their growth? What do you think?
Well, first of all, I was not a freak athlete growing up. Actually, it was
Right.
I was long and gangly and pretty uncoordinated. And the interesting thing of how that segues into your question is, as I did more and more sports, it began to develop my motor skills as it applied to each one of those specific sports that I was competing in. So when I first started playing football, I ran with my head on my back. So I'd be running. I run like this, right? Now, interestingly enough, then I started running track, and I brought my head forward. So I started running with better technique and better form, and it translated to what I was able to do on the football field. Different things that I did when I played football, and I said this on the panel earlier, different things that I was able to do on the football field translated over to the basketball court. You know, the way I picked and rolled, the way I, tried to go around the defender, the same exact thing on the football field. The way I kept leverage as it applied to a ball carrier. If I keep my outside foot on the running back's inside shoulder, or if I have outside leverage on the running back, I keep my inside foot to leverage the outside shoulder. A lot of the different skills and techniques that I was able to actually begin to look like a freak athlete were actually developed by doing different.
Of other sports.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if if you guys were all here for Cal Ripken this morning, and if he alluded to this, yikes, I'll stand over here. But, he always attributes playing soccer as a kid as giving him a lot of skills that translated to baseball, made him a better athlete all around. So it is strange that, the specialization, it seems like kids want to do it or parents want to make it because they think they got the next Giancarlo Stanton in their house. But next thing you know, that they're burning out, right? So, Dave, you have been doing the uniform thing for a long time, right? Youth and high school sports. It seems like that more and more design, brand are really important to young athletes, and what they're wearing is more important than when we were kids, right? How have you seen that evolve over the years? And what's kind of next? You see some sort of trend coming, something different? I don't know about you guys. We watched Army-Navy this weekend. The great game, amazing uniforms,
Yeah.
right? The Blue Angels, right?
Well, you're right. It is an evolution. For a lot of you, if you're in your 40s and 50s, you go back to when we played, and here's a T-shirt, and hand it back in at the end of the season. So, they watch the pros on TV, and they want to wear that insignia. I think what I call the big three, Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, have certainly perpetuated that. And I think we've heard a lot about a lot of these youth leagues are pricing ourselves out of the market. I think that's part of the problem. You look at the price points at some of the branded things, it's crazy. And at our company, we also handle the concessions for Kansas State athletics up at the stadium. And we carry Nike. K-State's a Nike school. And we have the replica jerseys with a price point of $100. And it's just crazy. I've been in China. One of the factories we use also makes for Nike. And it costs us $7 to make that jersey. So I think it started to reach a tipping point to where the bigger companies are paying so much for endorsements that down at the youth level, it's pricing them out of the market. We're starting to see a little bit of backlash from that. Whether that'll continue or not, I don't know.
Are you able to, with the more, for lack of a better word, the more generic brands that are producing these uniforms, are they starting to step up their design modules? You still don't have the cool UA or the swoosh, right? But you still might be able to do some design things.
Yeah, it's well, 2 points. Our industry has been a knockoff business since I've been in it. Somebody will come out with something cool, the next year everybody's got it. So everyone follows each other all the time anyway. The main shift that you're seeing is the shift to sublimation. And a lot of people think sublimation's new. It's not. It's been around for decades internationally with soccer and cycling. And then you really credit Nike with the Oregon Ducks about 10, 12 years ago on bringing that back in. Now everybody's doing that. That's changing. Overall, it's good. But the pricing of stuff is getting up there. You're going to see pricing continue to come down, though. It's a hyper-competitive market right now.
Thank you. Terry Hazeltine, Maryland Sports. First of all, happy birthday, Terry. Nothing like spending your birthday at being at a conference.
Happy birthday.
Like I told you, this is what I wanted to do on my birthday. It's on my bucket list.
Ashley has a cake in the back. So Terry, sports tourism, right? Terry's in charge of making sure sporting events of all shapes and sizes come here to Maryland, spend their money, and he does a great job doing it. How many of you are kind of floating around the country? Does everybody have a Terry Hazeltine in their midst, or is that part that's growing?
Well, the sport tourism industry continues to increase about 3.5% annually. It's relatively recession-proof. As it pertains to someone at the state level, I am few and far between. But at the jurisdictional level, there is about 525 jurisdictions across the United States that have a sports commission or someone who is charged with the sports tourism arm. We here in the state of Maryland are very fortunate that our previous governor and our current governor obviously saw the value of what sports could be to our economy. Sure. In FY17, Maryland Sports, along with our Team Maryland partners, touched 324 youth and amateur sporting events across the state of Maryland, generating $181 million in direct spending. That's direct spending, not economic impact. If we were to put that into an economic impact equation, that's a little about $750 million in economic impact in the state of Maryland through youth and amateur sports alone. You add on the big stuff like NCAA championships, Army-Navy games, international soccer tournaments and the like, we're well over $1 billion industry in the state of Maryland on an annual basis. So we continue to rise, but we do it with our partnerships and the relationships that we created across the state. So at the state level, few and far between, but jurisdictionally, 525.
It's great. I bet you will see more and more states doing this, right? I mean, didn't
No,
we rob you?
we don't
from,
need the competition at the state
Didn't
level.
we rob you from Kentucky?
I was in Kentucky,
Yeah.
so Kentucky had one. The other state that's out there that's pretty strong in the market is Utah.
Yeah.
Jeff Robbins runs a really good program, but they're the legacy of the Winter Olympic movement, as are some of the other ones that you saw originally at the state level, but then declined because they moved into the jurisdictional level.
Yeah, but there's a dearth of cocktails in Utah, so I think we got the one up on them. Last part of that, Tara, is there any sports that you're kind of seeing getting more and more traction that maybe you didn't see 5 years ago, and all of a sudden you're seeing more of that coming to town?
Well, we went through the phase where experiential runs were, kind of the kind of thing that were hitting the market. Now, you can find an experiential run everywhere around the corner. So they're starting to lose a little of their pizzazz out there in the marketplace. You're seeing, unique sports like Quidditch and sports like that come online. You're seeing people break away from the normal trends. You got, Matt back here with lacrosse. You're seeing lacrosse being played in, smaller fields, shorter confines. You're seeing box lacrosse. You're seeing alternations of traditional sports taking place where people are seeing short, sided football, 7-on-7 football taking off because a lot of that might be health related, but also you're seeing more trending off of traditional sports, breaking them down so smaller numbers can hit the fields or the courts, so there could be a deeper competition level. Therefore, more participants, more activation, more people being able to be drawn in. So you're seeing a lot of that trending right now. You're also, like I said, some of the unique things, like I mentioned Quidditch. I mean, 10 years ago, Quidditch didn't exist. Now it's one of the fastest growing sports out there. People are marketing around every corner. We're trying to convert and make a beach Quidditch event because we have obviously Ocean City, so we're trying to take advantage of that. Volleyball's back on the move on the beach side. You're seeing that. And I know it's a topic we're going to discuss, esports. We just sponsored a panel at the U.S. Sports Congress on esports. Believe it or not, people see esports as gamers and people sitting, with remote controls in their hands. Hate to tell you, a lot of these guys at the professional level of esports, they train like LeVar did for football. They are out there physically training because the endurance of having to be on that trade show floor all day long playing the game, the sweat, the competition, the pressure of performing. Imagine the pressure of performing if you're not in good shape.
Yeah.
And so, yes, some of us see it as a hand agility thing, but esports is growing and it's not a market that's going away. The question is, how do we turn that into a physicality so we don't have more of the things that are happening in the Project Play reports and others? How do we turn that into a non-sedentary lifestyle? And that's a
Terry,
a challenging question.
Yeah. No, you're right. And we're going to talk more about esports in a few minutes because it is a good point. And I want to get all you guys' take on sport, no sport, the whole NCAA thing. It's interesting. Max Levitt, leveling the playing field. First of all, I know Jay mentioned this, but congratulations. He's nominated for a CNN Hero. The work you do refurbishing this equipment, getting into the hands of kids in need, it's really amazing. Congratulations on that. Yeah. Max, the question I have for you is a little broad in scope, but in your view, what is the most pressing issue facing youth sports today? I mean, there's so many. You heard John talk about some of those big issues in this study. Like, what do you see? You're out there kind of in the trenches.
Yeah, I think the main issue, and I deal with the issue of low-income kids playing sports. I think the main issue has been the privatization of youth sports. So, 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted to play a given sport, you were more than likely going to your public recreation department, where you were going to find, a very affordable sports option, or in a lot of cases, is actually completely free to play a sport. What you've seen in the last 20 years is you've seen a lot of folks here, a lot of folks out there. There's a lot of money to make in youth sports, right? So capitalism has kind of flushed the market, and there has been this rise in youth sports leagues. So now, if you want to play a sport, it's no longer public recreation. If you want to play soccer, sometimes you're choosing from 3 to 4 private youth soccer leagues or football leagues or whatever. If you're a middle upper class family, you're willing to pay the extra money to put your kid in a higher quality experience, better coaches, better fields, better facilities. The whole experience, private versus public. Public's not going to be able to compete with the private sector. So if you're public recreation and you've lost your middle upper class families to the private sector, it's really not feasible for you to offer, certainly not a free athletic option, definitely not an affordable athletic option, and certainly not as robust of an athletic portfolio as you used to do. You lose your highest paying customer, you also get your budget cut by the government. Basically every 5 to 10 years you see recreation get cut. So if you're a low-income family, there's no longer a public recreation option for you. You can't afford to play in the private sector. So you see these low-income families looking around and saying, look, my kid wants to play lacrosse, he wants to play baseball. There's really no option for them to play right now. And, you know, I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for these private sports leagues coming in and offering a better situation, but it certainly builds inequity. And I know we've seen just the struggle that a lot of these families have when their kid comes home and he wants to play baseball, his friends play baseball, parents go and look online and see what it's going to cost to get their kid involved, and you're looking, you know, this is the cost of, you know, putting food on the table for a week or paying the heating bill. To put your kid in a baseball league and sacrifice that is not possible. So there's got to be something to be done to kind of, you know, bring the, and that's not just sports, right? That's in American society in general. The wage gap is having an effect on a lot of things, and sports is not immune to that at all.
No, and Max makes a good point. I mean, we see it all the time. I work with the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation. You should meet them, by the way. You do a lot of similar work that you do. But, you know, it's that old catch-22. If we can't afford to play, and we don't have the equipment or the venues in which to play, then what path do we go on? Right. Then it's a whole societal issue.
Yeah, and it's in the schools as well. You know, you asked LeVar about playing, you know, multi-sport athletes, right? And I think it was, I learned this through the Project Play report maybe last year, that the median athletic budget, PE budget, is like $764 for the year, something like that. So we come across, now, for a lot of public schools, that budget doesn't really matter, right? You have PTAs, you have booster clubs, you go out, you raise your money for athletics every year. The 764 is really just gravy on the top. It doesn't matter. If you're a Title I or a charter school, you don't have a PTA or a booster club. You send your kids out to do car washes, you know, selling candy, donuts, Chipotle. I mean, I've seen, you go to a Redskins game, you walk around the parking lot tailgating, and there are kids everywhere trying to raise money for their schools. So we find a lot of schools offer two sports, 3 sports, that's it, and you're not getting a diversity in sports. So if you're not good at those 2 or 3 sports, or you don't like those 2 or 3 sports, you're probably never playing sports growing up. You're not going to play elementary, middle school. You're certainly not going to play in high school and college. So, you know, we see a lot of schools that are like, look, we would love to do lacrosse, baseball, softball, tennis, whatever, but there's no money for it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Max. Gabby Rowe, you've been doing the sponsorship thing for a little while now and know that inside and out. Talk a little bit about how sponsorship in youth sports is changing dramatically. I mean, earlier when we were talking, you said, look, the whole, you know, gold, silver, bronze model, send me a kit, I'll pick one out and send you a check. Those days are over, right?
Yeah, for better or for worse, the sponsorship industry is getting more sophisticated, and the sponsorship buyers need to know that there's a return on their investment in order to do that. But sponsorship is not a dirty word. It is actually creating win-win situations between every organization and the brands. And in fact, if you look at this conference, I've been obviously, I cannot go to any event and not focus on the sponsorship side of things. And even this event here, there's a great product that we are all enjoying. However, the sponsors are able to reach this demographic, which is a group they're looking to reach. All of these brands that are written here have a reason to be here. So this conference has created a win-win situation. It is something that I, as a facility owner, might be interested in these products, and these products are getting introduced to me. So there's a return on the investment from the sponsors here, and potentially even more importantly, every single property is able to have sponsorship revenue drop to their bottom line. If you add a new program, you add a new team, you need more coaches, you need more fields, you need another facility. If you have this conference with no sponsorship, or this conference with sponsorship drops to the property's bottom line. It's a beautiful asset that way. And even as this property grows and more people are here, your sponsorship revenue can grow, and you're increasing the win-win partnership that this conference itself would have with brands who are choosing to sponsor it. Obviously, you have to deliver on that investment. If all of these sponsors, not to put pressure on anyone here, if they figure out that this didn't really move the needle for them, they're not coming back. So that's why your old-fashioned sign-on-the-wall or gold, silver, bronze package is a thing of the past, because you have to not only understand the brand's objectives, but deliver on them. But here's the great thing. If you do, they will pay more for the same product. Think about that. It's not, if I'm selling you a cheeseburger today for $1, and tomorrow I say now it's $5, they're not really going to want to buy that cheeseburger for $5. Sponsorship is different. It's immune to recession. It's immune to any normal economic model that says my product costs me X, you're going to pay me Y, the same product can be sold for more and more and more. So if you have, as a property, a successful sponsorship program, the sky's the limit to what you can do with it as long as you're delivering that return on investment.
Yeah, talk a little bit about, because it seems like youth sports is just perfect for sponsorships, because everyone wants kids, everyone wants moms, everyone wants millennials, technology, social media. How are all this playing into it, and who's doing it right? Like, you've seen it. Who's doing a great job? Maybe what's next? Expound on that a little bit.
Well, I've spent most of my career on the professional side, and I'm just recently getting into the youth side of it. But the key to the whole thing is understanding is what is your audience? And we work with, in the soccer world, I work in the lacrosse world as well. The lacrosse audience is a very different demographic than the soccer audience. The soccer audience is bigger, generally speaking, lower income. Lacrosse market is smaller, generally speaking, higher income. So for lacrosse, we're going after JP Morgan, we're going after Rolex, we're going after brands that want to reach that demographic. On the soccer side, it's a lot of soccer endemics, and it's a lot of brands that are trying to reach that specific demographic. But youth sports are also different. It's actually, there's also a local versus a national opportunity. Kind Bar wants to reach everybody. Premier Orthopedic Group of Philadelphia only really cares about Philadelphia. So you have to really be a matchmaker. We talked about Match.com before. That's really what a good property does, and a good property agency like ourselves does. It says, I'm going to match this type of a brand with this type of a demographic, and if that's properly done in the youth space, the numbers are big and the results can really deliver, and then again, you're creating an annuity for yourself with more and more revenue being able to be generated every year, a better win-win situation every year, and you're selling what you already have. This conference doesn't cost any more or less to put on, with or without sponsors. However, your bottom line is really increased.
That's great.
Can I chime in on that?
Yes.
Because I find it to be so interesting, because you listen to the reasoning of each gentleman here, and now a model that has been so prevalent in the pros and in the college ranks, which is you race to be a top 10, top 25 team. You race to be an elite team, an elite organization. And it could just be that specific sports team. Now you're seeing that model being embraced at the high school and at the youth level. And so the panel that we had earlier, where we were discussing, participation numbers and participation numbers being down. And one of the things that I said is participation numbers are down, but the talent pool is not shrinking. Right. So it's two different ways of you got to look at it. It's two different perspectives. You may be down on total participation, but you're not down on the talent, because what was just stated, if you build an elite program, the sponsors will come. Yeah. It's interesting because then to tie it into big brands, there's a brand out there, and I hate to say it, but I'm going to say the brand because it proves the point. There's a brand out called Battle right now. They took a Nintendo logo and put Battle inside of the logo. It's very, it's you can recognize it, right? Their model has been to take all the elite 8th grade 14U teams around the country and put product on those guys. Their 5-year, 4-year, and I don't want to speak for them, but it's in a way it's brilliant, because it's a motor ship, it's a motor boat versus a cruise liner. They can maneuver in and out of getting into shallow water where the bigger brands will not be able to take their big ships into those waters. They've taken, and in a guerrilla style, you've put mouthpieces in their mouth, you see their mouths, you see Battle. They take their pads off, you see Battle, and now they've transitioned into putting it on the uniforms, because it's such a saturated industry, such a competitive industry, and a knockoff industry, that they've actually did something. They took what Under Armour did, created a need, a response for a need, but also took from the other big three and Adidas, and we call, in my industry, we call Adidas the party crashers. They don't start the party, but they crash it, right? and they've done an amazing job of crashing parties like Nike, right? So they joined the party, and what they've done is they've leveraged culture. So instead of pushing a product, you're pushing culture. And now by pushing culture, you're able to push the product. And then that's where it comes in with sponsorship dollars, because now you're talking about, it's not really about the participation where you can't afford it. It's more about where can you put your dollars to get a return on your dollars. So now everybody is adopting the model of elite, because if you can get in the elite program, then you have a return. 5 years. Within 5 years of Battle doing what they're doing, they have a ton of guys that are now playing in the National Football League where you see them wearing Battle products. It's almost the way Kevin Plank built
It is.
Under Armour.
And Marucci did
It's
that with
amazing.
baseball, too, to some extent. Marucci came in and started giving talented young.
So
but that's
it's
really
just
good
amazing to
perspective.
chime
Yeah.
in on, just to hear the reasoning and the thought process of going all the way down. It builds revenue for the state. It's finding a way to build a different mousetrap as it applies for the product, and how sponsors are looking at what they want to return from it. But from the micro standpoint of it, how it impacts the people that may not have the budget to actually be able to execute, to be able to be applicable to the three gentlemen that are sitting next to them. It's kind of cool how things work, right? I just thought I'd tie that together
it's
for
great.
everybody that's sitting out there.
It's a great perspective. Thank you, LeVar. Listen, the last few questions, and then hopefully you guys will have a few. It's just going to be kind of going down the line, getting a perspective, some quick answers. Dave, we're going to start with you, okay? Going back to participation, especially, and Max, this is kind of what you were speaking of, participation in underserved communities where they don't have the access. In your view, what is one thing? What is a one important action step that maybe someone can do, or something can be done to get more kids, especially in these underserved communities, playing some sort of a team sport on a regular basis?
I think awareness, and I think, you can't fake leadership. You can't fake leadership at the parent level. You can't fake it in the community leader level. So it's just like anything else that you're trying to build. You get the right people involved.
Derek?
I think you hit the nail on the head, but also accessibility. We build these facilities, and we build them with maybe the elite mentality, but there always has to be a built-in program that allows people who don't have the means to have access to those facilities, because you don't know who's going to walk through the door. It's going to be your next superstar, and it could be that person who has an innate skill set but has never been able to have an ability to perform, and they need that access to the venue. They need that access to a quality leader in the community. But really, at the end of the day, it's access. We got to provide more access to these high caliber facilities for those who
Yeah,
don't
it's
have
really
the means.
interesting. Terry mentions, and Gabby, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they, I keep mentioning the Ripken piece, but we are at Ripken Stadium. But the Ripken Foundation, early on in their existence, they were formed in 1999. Early on in their existence, they were doing programming. And what they realized really quickly was programming is great. A lot of these kids in these communities do not have safe places to play. If they do have a field, it's filled with broken glass, it's crappy, or Parks and Rec doesn't have the money to take care of it. So they started 5 years ago building what they call youth development parks. They're multi-purpose turf fields that cost about $1 million each. And they build them around the country, and they just opened their 75th one in Baltimore last week, 2 weeks ago. So I think they, at least from their perspective, anecdotally, have seen a big girth in those facilities, and they're world-class facilities in some neighborhoods that would never imagine seeing those. Gavin?
Yeah. My thoughts are, if we want to do this right, we need to strive to take the financial wherewithal equation and just eliminate it from the participation side.
Yeah.
If we want the best or the most kids participating in sports, and we all do, the best and the worst, we need to take the financial equation out, which is difficult. And then tying it back to the sponsorship world, and kind of to the CSR, the corporate social responsibility world, I would love to see, I have a dream. My I have a dream speech is where corporate sponsorship isn't purely based on revenue. And even if you need it to be, and I'm sure this is music to your ears, you can take a page out of the Tom's Shoes folder and say, all right, they built a whole brand on, if I buy a pair would go to kids that don't have shoes. So maybe every time you buy a $100 jersey from your store, from Nike, Nike gives free equipment to your program. Make a direct tie to it. Make the companies make their sales tied to something which is going to help eliminate the financial equation from more kids playing sports. That's a way to tie in maybe all of this into a solution.
Cool thought. Max?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. It's resources, resources, resources. I actually think that there are a lot of great organizations out there trying to meet this demand from low-income America, whether it's Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, Title I schools, youth development programs. They don't have the resources to scale what they're doing. So whether it's coming from corporate America or the government or foundations, there's not enough funding and not enough resources out there to help these kids play. I mean, for what we do, people come into our warehouse and they leave with $10,000 of sports equipment, and all of a sudden they have a lacrosse program like that. Like, it was easy. Cool. They just didn't have the resources up until then. So I think it's just a resource type of thing, more attention being paid to the issue, which is, we're so happy Aspen Institute is around doing what they're doing, because when we first started doing what we did, there were like maybe 3 statistics I could point to prove my point about youth sports. And within a couple of years of you guys doing what you do, there's my grant writing looks a lot better because of the statistics you guys have thrown. So just more attention, more resources being put on the issue is all we need.
Thanks. John?
Yeah, so at Project Play, we say think small. And think small means be creative, be outside the box. Like Max, that must have been outside the box, thinking of what you ended up starting doing. They need more play spaces, kids who are underserved. So create small play spaces in urban cities. We see more of that with soccer pitches that are being created. Create ideas that you can get transportation to and from parks for kids who don't have after-school transportation, or to or from practices for games. If you're in a rural environment, you can have shared use facility agreements with other schools. You can partner with foundations, with nonprofits. There's no silver bullet, and funding is the biggest, most critical element, but there are small, simple ways that you can make an impact that really has a big impact, like we see with Max here. He's done a great job.
LeVar?
You guys want my opinion on this, huh? You're supposed to laugh, guys. Wake up! Jeez. I think the one word that I would use that kind of sums it up and ties it all together is incentive. I think if there is enough incentive and being unique to each category involved, whether it be because you cannot get around there needing to be a financial investment in it. You can't get around there needing to be a resource, the kids or the coaches or the leadership or the people giving back. There is always going to have to be those elements that are involved with having success and being able to fight or grow or solve this riddle, because quite frankly, it's a riddle that continues to riddle us all, right? No one has solved it. No matter how much success any of us have had on this panel or any of you out there, no one has solved that riddle. And so I think as it stands, I think that's perfectly put. You have to think small, because if the incentive isn't starting from small, then you'll miss small. And unfortunately, the kids and the families that need that assistance to be able to participate fall in the small. So I think as you break it down and you find the incentive which within each one of those small places, if you can find the resources to go with that incentive, then you start to run a chance of being able to truly address it. Because at the end of the day, it's really kind of like lip service, right? Yep. At the end of the day, we feel good. But really think about if it really applied to our kids, like your kid that you had to raise, that's in your home. If you had to figure out how to actually finance for your child, what to do, if you take that same approach towards a child that has nothing to do with you and really try to figure out what that solution is, you will probably run a better chance of finding that solution versus the other way around. So I think for me, and that's why I'm so involved. And listen, if you ever hear me ever going broke, you can't say I didn't spend all my money on trying to help kids, because that's where it's all gone. I've paid for surgeries. I've paid for kids to come here from different countries. I've paid for tuitions. So I'm not just talking, I live it. And the one thing that I've always have experienced or or watched is how nervous maybe it is, maybe how the nerves that go into really jumping in and supporting as it applies from the true untampered, no politics, no real agenda, just true love of something, whether it's giving back, whether it's the kids. I truly love kids. So I want to be a mentor, and I can't tell them to position themselves to do something that I don't do first myself. Right. So with that being said, I think that it's incentive. If the incentive is strong enough across every category, it's something that there's a solution that lies within the incentive.
Thanks, LeVar. And to your point, willingness to make that initial leap, right, and get involved and then see what happens there. A lot of people, it's a little trepidation, right?
And I'm not attacking anybody, by the way. That was not an attack on anybody whatsoever. That was just more of a general statement. You know, that's just so we're clear.
If you were attacking me, I was about to take you down right here. You were this close.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Gab. Please don't hurt me. Bad knees.
All right, we got like a couple more, and then it's happy hour. We're going to go down the line with a couple of more. Going back to this esports. So 20 NCAA schools now offer esports scholarships. That blew me away. Is this a legitimate sport at any level, or is it a sign of the apocalypse?
You want to know what my favorite sport is?
I do.
My favorite sport is chess. I love cheerleading too. Chess is my favorite sport. Sport, not board game. That's my favorite sport. So there have been plenty of sports throughout history that have never received the type of respect worth being given. There are a ton of guys that I play ball with that are as old as me and older that have still sit around. And as technology has really advanced, they sit on their headphones and play Call of Duty and different things like that. So is it a sport? There have been enough sports that have not been considered to be sports in the past for me to ever pass a judgment and say something that people view as a sport to not be a sport.
It's interesting.
So I say sport.
John?
Personally, no, I don't think it's a sport, but it's where kids are at. It's where young people are at. So the industry has to go there because that's where they're at.
Max?
Yeah, I fall under the same line. I don't know if it's a sport. I know from our standpoint, we're constantly combating kids sitting on the couch. You know, there's so many reasons to sit on the couch now instead of going outside and playing with your friends. So it makes me a little bit, it's not the apocalypse necessarily, but it makes me a little bit nervous just thinking about how many kids are, going to spend 4 to 7 o'clock every day after school sitting on the couch instead of going outside and playing ball with their friends, learning teamwork, work ethic, accountability. I think there's a lot more life lessons to learn in a team sport than there is just sitting on your couch.
Yeah, I just think it depends on how you define it. With the word sport, of course, from again, as the sponsorship person on the panel here, it's a sport. And it's a very lucrative sport and one with lots of eyeballs and something you can really sell against. But from the former athlete side, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that just from the fact that I don't get it. So, and I never really played those, and I was a multi-sport athlete, so I don't get it. But depends on how you define it.
Terry?
Well, until we were involved with the panel last week and I got to meet one of the professional gamers and heard what his regimen was, his diet was, and the things that he was doing to prep and play to get ready for performances, sport. But like I said, I was of the mindset of sitting on the couch, doing this, not being physically active. Right. And then I saw what the growth and the magnitude of what some of the higher skilled performers or athletes are doing in the sport, and hearing that they were going through these dietary regimens, they were training, they were going through the day of, like it would be for a professional athlete to prep for this, this, and this, and to get in the right mind in order to perform at a very high level. Yeah. So it converted me to being a legitimate sport.
Cool. Dave?
Today I would describe it as a competition, but that thing is also sliding. You look at professional fishing. Is that a sport? So it becomes a gray area. What I see in 5 to 10 years is our definition of sport changing, and it would include that.
Yeah. Speaking of fishing, we do have a Bass Masters Championship coming to Hartford County here.
Yes,
next
we do.
summer. You guys ever see a show called The McLaughlin Group? Most of you might be young. It's years ago, and so John McLaughlin used to ask the panel a question, then he'd answer with the answer. So I mean, wrong. It's not a sport. All right. Last question, and if you have a couple, we'll take them. If not, we'll go drink beer. Start with you, Dave. Work down the line. Which of these is the biggest danger to youth sports participation? Fear of injury, rising costs, or yes, video games, or none of the above? Dave.
Wow. I'd say probably video games. It goes back to interest of the kid. You know, back in 2008 and 2009, when we had the economic recession, our company does a lot of cheer. And our business went up 30, 40% annually.
Yeah.
And what we found was that if you're a parent and if you've got a daughter, 15-year-old daughter involved in cheer, in terms of things you're going to give up before you would take her out of that, it's right there with food. So I think most of it is interest in the kids.
Terry?
Well, to go along with what he was saying, you realize that 72% of people put more into their kids' sports and activities than they do into their retirement funds.
Wow.
You know, in today's society, so it shows you that. But when it's all said and done, I think video games and the individualization of kids now at an earlier age is going to be, I think, part of the impact on the growth or impact of youth sports. I think now that, you know, there are so many things that kids can do that are external to competing on a team, I think they're just being pulled in too many directions. I can tell you right now, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old who have a better social life than I ever had. And it's because they're being drawn in so many different directions, and there's so many other stimuluses out there, video games being one of those. So, you know, to answer your question, I think all of the above is the right answer, because I think depending on where you are in society is what would be your factor, which is going to keep you away from the team sport. But now it's just too much stimulus and too many things that can draw them away from joining a team and participating.
Yeah, thanks for not answering that, Terry. Gabby?
Well, if you consider video gaming a sport, then you're good, because that's
Right.
then participation's way up. But the financial equation, I got to get back to that. It's tough. And I don't think early specialization, I don't necessarily have a strong opinion whether it's good or bad. But when you see the decreases, and I'm sure your study looked at this, that goes, you know, this sport is down and this sport is down. There might be the same number of people playing a number of days of sport a year, except it's 300 days of soccer and no lacrosse or football and basketball for that athlete. I don't know if there's probably less sport being played. There's certainly less multi-sports being played. But it's a whole combination of things. And I think that we just got, if we all do a really good job of delivering a great value and a great opportunity, then we'll continue to have hopeful continued growth. And it would help if you made, gaming an actual sport.
Thanks. Max?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the rising cost is my biggest concern in the youth sports world. I think it feeds a lot of things. It feeds sports specialization. Kids aren't introduced to many different sports. Playing video games is certainly cheaper than getting your kid involved in a $1,000 a year plus sporting event every year. So I think the rising cost is what concerns me the most.
John?
My biggest concern is not asking kids what they want. That's our number one strategy. Ask kids what they want from sports. Because kids are the consumer. They're the ones you actually are giving the product to. And I think, too often we complain a lot about video games. I mean, video games have been around for years. I played them when I was younger, and you stayed inside and you were playing them. But think about why kids gravitate to video games. They're kid-centric. They're kid-focused. They've got lots of action and activity. You can play multiple players, so you can play with your friends. You can control the activity. And one of the biggest things is you don't have parents over your shoulders critiquing every move, like we too often unfortunately see in youth sports. So, instead of complaining about video games, I would say youth sports should take a look at what are they doing right, and let's try to create that model so we get more kids playing youth sports.
Cool. LeVar, you want to close it out?
What were the options again?
The options were video games, fear of injury or rising costs, or something else.
Or something else?
Yes.
It's interesting because the challenges that exist today are still the challenges that existed before. There was an economic recession, and in this country, there was still a way to figure out how to play sports with no money. You know, I was reminded of Pele. Pele was one of the poorest athletes growing up, and they used balled up newspaper to kick around, and in some places they used cans, they used rocks because they did not have products. So I'm not going to necessarily plant it in economics. I'm not going to necessarily plant it in injuries, because in the end, I think we all know that injuries take place whether in sport or not. The issues that have arisen in more of a, I guess, a stronger narrative in recent years would maybe lend to going that direction of one of those options. But I'm going to say this. I'll use two words, and one word I've already used, and I'll take a second word and throw it out there. I think it has a lot to do with incentive. The second word would be liability. And I think as you look at those two words and you measure it out as to how that applies to the participation and how it can challenge moving forward, kids just aren't really incentivized unless they're an elite athlete anymore.
Yeah, but let me ask you this, LeVar, not to push back a little bit, but like, what happened to a pickup game? I don't know the last time I drove down the street and saw kids in a pickup. That's all we did on Saturday.
What is the incentive of a pickup game? I know for me, when I was younger, you know what my incentive was? I wanted to be Art Monk. I wanted to be Michael Jordan. I wanted to be Magic Johnson, whoever else, anybody that you can think of. I ran around, and I know we all did, of an older generation. We ran around saying, I'm Michael Jordan, fade away, right? Yeah. So even though you did not realize that there was an incentive, there was still the value of incentive for a pickup game, whether it was hockey. I thought I was Mario Lemieux. I ran around with tennis shoes on with a hockey stick and thought I was Mario Lemieux. There was incentive because I lived in Pittsburgh, and anything Pittsburgh was what I was into. So whatever season it was, that's what I did. Why has that changed? Let me tell you why it's changed. Because instead of Michael Jordan and Larry Bird being a stick figure, they are now as human as we are in the video world. To me, I think the replacement of wanting to be has been replaced with it's very easy to live it through my mental aspect of I can actually control him versus become him.
That's really interesting.
So it's more of the incentive of getting your ass up. Yes. And actually thinking that I could be the next Shaquille O'Neal. I could be the next Cal Ripken Jr. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because to me, if these kids aren't playing legacy or dynasty on the game, they wouldn't even know who Cal Ripken is outside of a name on an edifice. So it's just, to me, I think that, and then the other word, which is obviously the liability, I think because of the things that have arisen in a way now where there are legal claims, legally these programs are having to go under, whether it be doing away with it at a school or a youth league or in college or even the attack of it on pros. Because of the liability of it, it has become convenient and has become easy to step away. It's no reason to put money and resources behind this if we're suing the school every single time you turn around. And now it's a larger conversation where you have to try to tie all of this together. Right. But liability and incentive. If there's not enough incentive, if you think about it, colleges, well, high schools too. High schools recruit. Yeah. They recruit.
Big time.
Do you know that, guys? High schools recruit. Colleges are now going out, and I use this in this term so that I can drive the point home. Colleges recruit their job force earlier than ever now.
That's true.
So they're looking for their talent in 7th and 8th grade.
I know. I thought UCLA signed an embryo last week.
7th. So here's the incentive. If kids are being offered scholarships, right? If kids are being offered scholarships at that young of an age, the kids that know that they have an opportunity to get those scholarships are going to haul ass every single time to where they need to go, and their parents are going to make sure that they're supporting that. And if it's not, there's somebody there that's going to make sure, because they're incentivized by what the results. And the other ones are looking at it like, I don't have a chance. I don't have a chance. So, hey, I'll just play this video game. I'll hang out here, and this will work out for me. And if I do play, I'll play, but it's going to be at my convenience. So the incentive is not strong. The dream, we have to restore dreaming back into these children in order for them to get more active and excited about participating. And that, to me, liability and incentive challenges participation at the youth level.
Yeah, and just to point on that, incentive, I think fun is becoming a lost incentive.
Yeah, for sure.
That's, I think, how most, and with the specialization and the scholarship and all the pressure that's associated with it, and to your point about video games being you're by yourself without your parents looking over your shoulder, is regardless of how elite your program might be, if it's not fun, you're not doing anyone any favors. You got to make it fun. Make that an incentive, even if you're not going to play in college.
It's funny, Gabby, that's the first word that came to mind when LeVar was saying, what's the incentive? I'm like, when we were 11, the incentive was to go knock around with your buddies and have fun, you know? But listen, I know we're holding you up from a nice cold beer. Does anyone have a question for anyone up here? Because they're smart and great and funny. Yes?
Good evening. Again, I'm Teresa Bullock, and I'm in the Coffee Cruisers out of Rochester, New York. We're a neighborhood cycling program.
All right.
And I want to go back to the fun part of what you were saying. I'm waiting for the mic.
Way to run, Jay. Way to run.
He does it all.
I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on the fun piece of it and what LeVar was talking about with the incentive. Conky Cruisers is a neighborhood bicycling program operated in a very challenging open-air drug market, third in the nation in concentrated poverty. And some of the incentives in our program is that you can earn a bicycle. So people want to be a part of our neighborhood program so they can earn the new bike. You can earn sneakers to go back to school. That's kind of my anti-poverty initiative. They really work to learn whatever it is that I'm teaching each year so that they can earn sneakers. But the fun thing, and as a nurse, I need them in this neighborhood to learn how to stretch their food dollars. So we ride our bikes to the grocery store, and this is good for branding because Wegmans gives me money every year. Yeah. So I take my 200 participants to the grocery store. Everybody gets $5. The goal is you need to put together a meal for a family of 4 that must include a fresh fruit and a vegetable. Dessert is a bonus, and it's fun. And when he asks kids what they want, that's the one activity that the kids want to do over and over and over again. It's the cheapest activity that we do, the most educational, and the most fun.
Well, first of all, that's one of the coolest programs ever. Congratulations. And I saw Gabby get all happy when he heard Wegmans was involved. So
Wegmans was a $5 entry fee.
Yeah. Different Wegmans. But also your bicycle partner and your shoe partner are another one to talk about in addition to Wegmans, obviously. There's a win-win situation there.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts? Anybody else have any questions?
Just curious, LeVar, does football in particular have any, are they seeing any decline in numbers of young people playing it because of concussions and maybe neck injuries? And I'm just maybe pointing that toward football or hockey. I know the one question earlier talked about, fear of injury. And I was just wondering if maybe football has been seeing any data that says maybe some kids are not playing it that that have in the past, percentage-wise?
You take that. Here. Look, watch this.
Thank you, LeVar.
There's the pass.
So yeah, football participation is down. Tackle football. There was a fascinating story, the Tuscaloosa News in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, huge football crazed state. They did a story that youth tackle football participation has been surpassed by flag football 2 years ago. Just in Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where Nick Saban and the University of Alabama exists, that was a pretty startling statistic to me. Hockey actually is up. It's up quite a bit over in recent years. And one big reason is because they've embraced the American development model, where you're not treating kids like they're adults. You're treating them like kids in developmental stages. And they got rid of checking, and they got rid of, they turned the ice rink around and played small-sided games. And so you just have to think like that to understand that kids aren't miniature adults. You have to treat them like kids.
From my perspective as a former player, now that's statistically speaking, and that's very well founded. From the sentimental or opinionated side of it, I think that there's a lot to do with how these kids are within the game of football, how they are treated and how they do feel and what they're able to handle. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times we say, well, I used to use the word sissification on my radio show. And I feel like in a lot of ways, today's youth are sissies in a lot of ways. And I say that with the most respect that I possibly can. But with that being said, I had to dig a little deeper. Yeah, I'm going to keep it real, man. I got to keep it real with you, right? So, but as I took a step back and humbly looked deeper into why I thought they were sissies, it really occurred to me and really an enlightening moment for me when I really started coaching. Like I was saying it more so as a mentor, coach an event, but then I started coaching. I wanted to totally have an immersed experience in terms of what it is that I'm building and basing my opinions off of. And honestly speaking, as a coach, I think it really was illuminating to see, how people respond to the things that you do and what goes into that. And it's not that kids are sissies, it's that I think they're a little bit more developed than what I gave them credit for. And once I got an opportunity to be around them, I realized that they're more sophisticated. Not sissies, but they're more sophisticated. And the sophisticated nature of dealing with them now comes into your mousetrap has to be way better than mother effing them or get your ass on the ground or go run your ass around this field, right? If you try to reach them in an old school manner, you're going to miss them. You're going to lose them, and they're going to check out on you, never to revisit it. And that to me is such an amazing epiphany, because what are most coaches in football? Old school. It can't exist anymore. There has to be an evolution of the thought process of the people who are instructing them, especially at a younger age, because they are more sophisticated. So you have to earn their trust in a totally different manner than what you did before, because it's not just about you have to be here, I'm going to bully you as a coach, and if you don't do it, I'm going to tell your dad because we're drinking buddies. Like, that doesn't work anymore. You have to be more sophisticated and more patient in what your approach is in reaching them. And I think that that's probably, to me, what I've seen. When they tune out, they leave. Like, it's crazy now. Like, back in the day, you get told off, this, that, and the other. You cry. You tell your parents tell you, suck it up. You don't quit. You finish the season. We'll decide there. Now, they leave. Yeah. They leave. Like, I don't have to deal with this. You're not going to talk to me that way, sir. Right? They leave. And that's different. That's like, I watched it with my own two eyes. Like, did he just leave? After warm-ups? It's warm-ups. Gone. Taking my friend with me. Did not return. And I say, look, I say this to the other guys because some of the guys played pro. There was a whole lot of us that were former pros that volunteered to coach on this team. I said, hey, guys, y'all got to loosen up a little bit. Y'all got to lighten up, or we're not going to have a team. We're not going to have a team. And this is high school. You're 16, 17, 18 years old, and you can't handle the guy talking to you that way. You left. So imagine taking that down to the youth level. So I think one of the biggest reasons why participation is down outside of the obvious, I think a lot of it is we have to learn how to we have to relearn and rethink our approach and what we're doing in the sport of football. Football cannot be just about winning and losing and trophies. When you're at a younger age, it has to be about learning. If we turn youth football back into learning, we have a better chance of getting the participation back. But if it keeps going away from learning and more to elite, there is always going to be a place for elite. There won't always be a place for those who aren't. And what's crazy is if they're not elite at that moment in time, at that juncture, then there's no LeVar Arrington, because I was not elite at that age. I developed, I played, and as I got a little older, I developed. So if they did not communicate and break that code with me, I wouldn't even be sitting here right now. So that's the challenge to me, outside of the obvious financial, injuries, different things like that. I think more so than that, did you ever play ball? Okay, the person who coached you, was there someone in your life at some point where there was not one thing that you would not do for that coach? Did you have one like that? I had several. There wasn't, if he told me to try to run through that glass right there, as crazy as it may sound, I strap it up and I would try to break that glass because that's how much I believed in them. That's gone. That's lost, and it's only there for elites. Elites have that experience. If you're not elite, you don't have that experience anymore, and that's sad because those kids that are not elite yet deserve to have that experience as well. I'm not saying that they should go run into the window, but what I'm saying is they should be able to have that trust and that belief in what it is that they're participating in. And I don't think that that's there. So it's easy to say injuries or I don't have the time or the finances. It's easy to say we'll pass up on it. And that's why participation goes down, in my opinion.
Great perspective. Dave, Terry, Gabby, Max, John, LeVar, thank you very much. Your insights were really worthwhile.